Well, hello and welcome to WHS AP Psychology at Home Edition. I hope your bathrobe is comfy and you have a cup of coffee, because today we are talking about 7.4 stress and coping. We're going to look at the different theories of stress and the effects of stress on psychological and physical well-being. What I'll try to do in these Psych at Homes is to connect some of the harder concepts that might not be spelled out in your Myers textbook or in the videos that I'm uploading for you, just so you still get kind of that classroom experience as well. I think our best place to start is to keep this diagram in mind as you are looking at a psychological understanding of stress. Everything is going to start with stressors. We're going to make the distinction between a stressor and your appraisal of that stress, and then your experience. Very different experiences of stress over here. So we're gonna really make sure that we can tell the difference between those two. So let's start off with sources of stress, and your sources of stress, we're gonna call those stressors. Those are events that happen to you. So if we were normally in class right now, everyone would be talking about how schoolwork is a source of stress. The daily hustle and bustle of the hallways and the busyness and running out to your car at 2:15, that's a stressor. That's a potential stressor. Your job might be a potential stressor. Maybe it's your parental units that can be a stressor for you. These are not stress. Now I'm going to go back to that because it's a really key point for this. Stressors are not stress. Stressors are events that happen, but they're not necessarily something that will stress us all out. Now we abuse this word. We literally abuse it. We say we're so stressed out. We say this person stresses me. We put a lot of our emphasis. The way that we use the word stress is really means stressor. We never really talk about our role in that. That's going to be hard for you to kind of, as we look to define this term, be able to kind of come to grips with, because the real psychological definition of stress is kind of something different from how we use it in everyday life. Stress, and I could not emphasize this enough, notice how I kept away from the pun there, stress is our reaction to something. And that really is the key thing. It is our reaction to what? What's that something? It's our reaction to a stressor. It's the process of appraising, and we're going to go over that term in a second. So let's just say right now it's the process of thinking and responding to a real or imagined threat. You've oftentimes worried about things and stressed about things that never happen. So it could be imagined, it could be real. But don't forget that whatever it is, there's going to be a bodily response with this. So stress is going to trigger the autonomic nervous system to fire off the sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight response, and you'll have a bodily reaction to your stress. Everything psychological is always simultaneously biological. So step one in this process is that you experience a stressor. Events or circumstances that are potentially threatening are the stressors. Just because you experience a stressor doesn't mean that you're going to feel stressed. For a lot of us, a stressor might be having to do a solo oral presentation in front of a large group. For me personally, that's kind of my job. I don't get stressed by that stressor. But if that was having to sing, I would experience an awful lot of stress. My daughter, on the other hand, she gets up and does the Mary Poppins for an entire play, and she enjoys herself. That's not a stressor for her. So these are events or circumstances that are potentially threatening. It depends on your appraisal. So we'll get to appraisal in a second. Types of stressors, what can they be? They could be life changes, hassles, pressure or frustration, discrimination, delays, lack of resources. All of these things could potentially be sources of stress. They're all stressors. Conflict is a stressor. Your conflict, and your book breaks it down into 3 categories. If you're having a hard time understanding these 3 categories, my advice is these first 2, approach, and avoidance. These 2 types of stressors, deal each with two things. So there's one thing over here, another thing over here. There's a concert I want to go to, and there's a playoff game for the Bruins I want to go to. They're on the same night. I can't go to both, so I feel regret that I have to pick just one. Avoidance. There's homework you have to do. There's a family get-together you don't want to go to that you have to go to. You don't want to do either, so you escape and you run away with your friend. Down here, this third one, approach avoidance, there's now only one thing that you are choosing with. So maybe there's a college you want to go to. There's so many wonderful opportunities. You're so excited about it, but you want to avoid the heavy price tag. So there's approach and avoidance. And seniors, that might be why you're feeling such paralysis on that decision. These are also stressors. The stress that you feel is going to depend upon this process called appraisal. And this is something that we never talk about in our society. We always say this person stressed you out. That's impossible. It is you who stresses yourself out based upon what? Based upon your appraisal. So appraisal is defined as when we look at an event and see if it is good or bad, and if we have the resources necessary to overcome it. If we see it as bad and we see ourselves as helpless, we're going to feel stressed. So here's a potential stressor. You've now got a 15-page research paper to write. It's negative. So you feel that negative appraisal. And you then go on to the secondary part, which is, do I have the ability to deal with this? If you're like, no, I've failed everything in the past, you're going to feel stress. If you're like, okay, I don't love this, but I can do this. I've been taught how to write research papers. I can manage my time this way. You're going to feel less stress. So it really goes back. I'm going to kind of skip over these a little bit to kind of hit this point home. It really goes back to this diagram, Stressor Mountain. We all experience stressors, but there are two types of us. There's someone who's stress hardy. And now notice in this diagram, the stress hardiness is like a shield to the oncoming reality of Stressor Mountain. And you notice how it kind of blunts the onslaught of feeling stressed, because the person is two things. They're emotionally intelligent. They know when they're starting to feel stressed, and they can identify that. They seek out other people. They understand that they have the resources to do this. Maybe they see it as a challenge that can help them grow, not as a threat. They realize they can improve even if they do fail. They understand that this is life, and sometimes life can be difficult. On the other side, a negative appraisal, someone who is not stress hardy, and this is a really important term right here, irrational negative self-talk, is the voice, is the tape recorder that plays in your brain telling you things that are harmful. Here, you're not going to do well. I don't have the resources to do this. It dwells on the fact that life should be fair, even though it never is going to be. It believes that the person should be perfect, and none of us can reach that. Irrational negative self-talk is one of those terms I want you to pull out and literally write when you get to the FRQ stage, because it is a fantastic psych term that shows you understand this, equal to being stress hardy. Someone who has irrational negative self-talk, do you see how that stuff, that bad thinking, acts as a magnifier glass that increases the negative effects of that stressor? So their appraisal says this is horrible and terrible and should never happen. I don't have the resources, and then they feel more and more and more stress. They're also going to engage in two things that your book doesn't do a great job highlighting. They'll awfulize and they will globalize. Awfulizing, you fail one exam, so now all of a sudden I'm going to fail the course, and I'm going to drop out of college, drop out of high school. I'll never get into college. I'll never get a job. I'm going to be homeless, living in a van down by the river. They've awfulized. One failure gets expanded. Or they might globalize. They might fail a test and be like, this means I am a failure at everything I do, and now that applies to my entire personality. Either way, very, very wrong. And notice that the person who's magnifying all of their events like this, constantly is firing off their SNS. Their parasympathetic nervous system never fires. They release constant corticoids into their bloodstream. They have physiological problems because their sympathetic nervous system is always firing off. Their immune system is weakened because it doesn't have the same energy as someone who is stress hardy, so they get sick more often. Being sick more often causes more stress and it's a downward spiral. So this is really how chronic stress creates long-term negative effects on your health. Keep in mind here that acute stress is going to be a beeline to both of these people. This is stress. Acute stress is stress resulting from specific events or situations that involve novelty, unpredictability. This is a car accident. It's going to immediately fire off that. This is being physically attacked, and this will cut through no matter what appraisal system you have. We do see slight differences in stress in genders. The measure of stressor that I would kind of gravitate to would be the social readjustment rating scale, but notice that it only is going to track how many stressors someone has been exposed to, not their actual stress level. Because again, your stress level is your appraisal of the situation. The other big thing from the exam that I would highlight is the general adaptation syndrome. This is a theory of how we respond to stress. Definitely something that you want to highlight. You want to know the three phases. You've got alarm, resistance, and exhaustion. Here, the stressor occurs and it takes a hit on you. You're going to have to deal with it a little bit. And initially, you bottom out a little bit, but your body's really good at coming into this resistance phase. But it can only hold the resistance phase so long until you deplete your energy reserves and head into exhaustion. I've seen a lot of multiple choice questions here where it's about when does someone get sick, and it's in the exhaustion phase. But I would definitely have that as a syndrome that you could explain if you were asked something on an FRQ about stress. But to review, the thing that I would still focus on is there's a difference between stressors and the stress that you perceive. What makes that difference? It's whether you are stress hardy or you engage in irrational negative self-talk. I hope this was helpful to kind of clear up a little of that confusion between a stressor and a stress. I hope you enjoyed these, and we will look forward to our next one on 7.5. Until then, take care, EP Psychers.